All right, welcome to Meeting the Minds. Today we got Andy Loughnane with us from Misericordia University. We're going to talk a little bit about soccer and the way he's set up his program, and a little bit about the mental side of the sport. So, Andy, thanks for coming on and joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Of course. So to start us off, just tell us a little bit about your program and the school that you're at, and give us a little bit of an elevator pitch for what you guys are doing and why people should take notice and be interested.
Sure. Misericordia is a university in northeastern Pennsylvania. We're a private institution. Athletically, we compete at the Division III level. From an academic standpoint, there's 3 colleges under our university umbrella: arts and sciences, business, and then specifically a health sciences college, which tends to be, I guess, the college and holds the programs that create a bit of a niche for us, especially in our area. We have good relationships with the local hospital, specifically the Geisinger system, which is kind of a healthcare conglomerate in the area. But there's a wide range of majors we offer for a small university, and it's about developing people. I would say the thing that makes Misericordia unique amongst our competitors, I think, is the community type feel that we encourage and the way we engage our students. Some people call that the Misericordia mystique. Some people would refer to the charisms, which, for lack of a better term, are our core values as a university. And those are, service, justice, mercy, hospitality. So it's kind of assumed that our students, once they undertake their 4 years, leave the university with the ability to showcase those charisms when they go out and tackle bigger things in the real world. So.
Yeah, well, and our world definitely needs individuals that are willing to tackle some of those bigger issues. Recently, obviously, there's been some negative things going on throughout the country, and we're all stuck in a spot where banding together and being able to be united in action, due to the coronavirus, definitely be something that will help every individual and every community that's out there.
Sure, and we believe that too, and I think from a program perspective, we buy into, or we believe in those charisms, and we've, through conversations with our players and some brainstorming and planning and, I guess, deliberate talk about our culture, we've identified what our core values are as a program. And again, the goal is to help, I think, the young men that end up graduating and moving on from our program to be able to go out and consistently make good decisions in reference to those values. A lot of times our guys bring values already instilled in them from growing up with their families and being in those types of structures. And so when they get here, we probably introduce some new things, but I think we also hold a responsibility as a program to build on some of those values that have already been incorporated and instilled in their minds. And so we want them to be able to reference those things and make decisions that are in concert, so to speak, with those values. And so I take that responsibility on in a big way, and I feel strongly about making sure our guys are prepared. And like you said, with the current climate, from a societal standpoint, even looking at our economy, I think they're going to need to be equipped with these value sets that allow them to kind of navigate the unknown and deal with some of the anxieties that come with the situation we're currently in.
Yeah, it's one of the things when I'm, coaching or talking with young people, trying to indicate that they will be the generation that sees the most change. The pace of change is not slowing down. And the only alternative is we have some massive collapse, which will still, for them, see a major change in society. So the values that they take into the world, and, the mindset that they take in the world is going to be a very important piece to their ability to, maybe reinvent themselves and continue to be successful as situations change. Now,
Definitely.
Obviously, every coach, every program seeks to instill like certain values and growth within athletes. How do you kind of focus from the recruiting aspect on bringing in people that are going to fit the culture that you guys are promoting and creating, within your team and within the university?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing question that we try to address as a coaching staff, right? How do we figure out who the right people are to bring into our program? Um, this isn't for everybody. That's a quote that I think I probably stole from Jay Vidovich out at the University of Pittsburgh and the men's soccer program that he's um, forging forward with there. He's done some good things there, and I heard him early on in his career at Pitt specifically talk about this isn't for everyone, and I don't think we necessarily use that language in our recruiting pitch, but it's an interesting point. And so when we go through the recruiting process, character is very big in terms of the identification process. Certainly, I want to see them play out on the field. There are specific things in terms of technical ability, a mind for the game, a soccer IQ, physical attributes, and athleticism that we look at as well. But I think a bigger part of the process for us right now probably centers around developing a relationship and learning about the character of the individual. So there's an understanding that when they join our program, we're going to be able to trust them with some of the things we already talk about. We're going to have a feeling, I guess, as a coaching staff, and it does extend to the rest of our group as well, because we include them in on this process. The incoming recruiting classes will have interactions via campus visits and overnight stays with the players on our team. Right now, we can't necessarily do that, so we're working around it by setting up FaceTimes and Zoom calls and phone calls for our 2021 class with players in our program. And so developing those relationships, not just from a coaching staff perspective, but also making sure they already have pre-established relationships with players on our team, I think allows us to feel more comfortable that whenever it's their time to step up and protect these values that we've instilled, they're going to be well equipped and feel a responsibility to do so, right? I think when you build those relationships and you garner the trust needed there, all of a sudden those young players start to take on their own roles in keeping the culture strong and start to assume their own sort of responsibility in maintaining that culture moving forward.
Yeah, no, I love that you're connecting them with the rest of the team before they're even on campus. I mean, I'm always a huge proponent of the importance of relationships within any team, within any partnership. I always look at young people that struggle to grow close to those people around them. It doesn't mean you have to be like the most popular person, but the ability to build working relationships, I think, is one of the key components in the modern world. I mean, no man is an island, right? You can't do it alone. If you look at any successful people, you're going to find, a group around them that's helping support their mission and their drive. And, you kicking off those relationships early, I think is a really powerful way, to make sure those relationships are strong as the day they step on campus.
For sure. And it's, I'm finding now in this current state where, again, there's some uncertainties, the relationship piece plays an even bigger role. Maintaining those conversations, whether it be, again, through an email, the text message, getting on a Zoom call or FaceTime. Maybe before this had happened, I understood the frequency that we needed to communicate with in regards to our prospective student athletes. But I think it's hit me even more going through the last 3 months and understanding we need to be having even more regular conversations with them, not to a point where we're doting or we're overbearing, but there's plenty of different things that we can talk about in the recruiting process, whether it be applications, again, core values and culture, playing style. There's plenty of things that we can communicate with these guys about in the short term that allow a conversation to continue and flow moving forward. And so I think, in talking about this class exclusively, I feel more prepared than I ever have. And that is kind of a strange thing to think about because, again, of the adversity we faced in the past 3 months, but I feel more prepared with this group going into the summer than maybe I ever have. And I think it's because of the increased focus on relationships and staying in touch.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I look at these times and, the caveat obviously is present circumstances excluded. Like there's a lot of people that are struggling, whether it be financially due to being out of work or, people getting sick, God forbid, but this is still a time that if you are healthy and you have the resources,
Mm-hmm.
that I think the focus should be on how do we make this a time that we actually get stronger. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you guys have found a way to do that. And you're looking at it from that angle, which to me is, indicative of a strong coaching mindset, and that typically spreads down to the athletes themselves.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, hopefully. I mean, I think for a young coach, you want to see that response from your players, but I've learned that it's not immediate, and you just need to continue having that message. And I agree with you completely. This is a time where forward-thinking players and programs and coaching staffs can create an edge for themselves. And again, it seems counterintuitive to what's going on, but I agree with you completely in terms of looking at it in that lens, so to speak.
Yeah, no, great. So obviously, Winning Mindset, we focus a lot on the mental aspect of the sport. That's, kind of the angle that we try to assist, teams and players, with growing. So for yourself, where do you find are the greatest mental struggles that athletes face? And I mean, you could focus in on when during that transition period. We all know that transitions are difficult at any level, but where are some of the mental struggles that pop up in, the teams and players that you've worked with in the past?
Sure. And kind of as you alluded to, the first struggle or the first, I think, mental barrier that college-bound athletes have to kind of wrap their mind around is that transition process when they come in to their first preseason. For us, preseason happens before the fall term usually, and that's a big task to get them obviously performing at a high level, at a college level, while also going through a transition process where they may be living away from home for the first time. They're having to manage their schedule more closely as an individual and may not have the oversight that was provided previously, either by their parents or by people that were in the high school environment they encountered. So again, I'll reference the relationships. Trying to strengthen relationships before they get here allows that transition process to happen a lot easier and more seamlessly, I would say. We still preface in our recruiting process that everybody's transition process happens a bit different or differently. And so for some people, it takes a week or 2 weeks. It takes that preseason period. For other people, it may take the entire fall term or the first season. And quite honestly, there's some guys that need an entire year or year and a half. Sometimes they finally feel comfortable and settled in by their sophomore year. We're really trying to do things, I think, in our program that make sure it doesn't happen in that time period. We want to do it more abruptly, more focused within that first year. And so we try to implement some things that can help them with the transition process. We've got an academic transition program for our first years where they do some study halls. One that's monitored by my graduate assistant, one, quite honestly, that I've never stepped foot into, that's managed by our upperclassmen. And then they also have a conversation with our graduate assistant once a week during that first term. And I think, again, that's the biggest piece of the academic plan. It's not necessarily the study halls and the time that they're putting in those study halls. Yes, important, but having an avenue to talk to a coaching staff member about everything not just academics, talking about, how they're getting on with their roommate. Do they feel like their RA is somebody that they can go to and have a legitimate conversation with? Obviously, the academic piece comes up in those conversations. And so talking about how to create relationships with professors, how to communicate proactively, right? And then the conversations sometimes shift over to the soccer side of things, but I would say more commonly they focus on things outside of soccer in that transition process. And so that's one thing that we found really helps get our first year settled quickly, allows them to have some success in the classroom, which breeds confidence. And that's a mental piece that I believe is vitally important to being successful in the classroom, on the field, outside of those two areas, in your social life even.
Andy, did I lose you? All right. Let me guess. You got a call?
No, I have a time limit set on my social media, and it just popped up out of nowhere. So I apologize.
No. You're all good. Yeah, I think it's so important that we make sure that, the life, the school, those other aspects of an athlete are being handled well and correctly. I mean, it just makes sense to me that if I look at most really successful people, you see that the other aspects of their life are orderly and disciplined, just like whether it's, they're a business person or whether you're an athlete. It's really difficult if you have like unsteadiness in different zones. Like, if your personal life's a mess, it's really hard to focus on being a great athlete. If your work life's a mess, it's hard to come home and have a great personal relationship with those around you. And helping athletes find that balance where academically they feel comfortable. So when they show up to practice, they're not thinking about, I got to ace that test or I'm going to fail this class. It's like, I can put all my energy right now into soccer because I know everything else is already taken care of.
Definitely.
I think that's a huge piece. Now, what about on the field? What are some of the areas that, you see, college athletes struggle in, when it comes to field play, and it probably isn't just freshmen. I mean, I found, I've worked with world and Olympic team members, college athletes, high school athletes, youth athletes. And one of the things that I have found really interesting is mentally, a lot of times you see the same problems or the same issues that people are struggling through. They're just like the specifics are a little different. And like, the pressure situation's a little different, but for the most part, they're very similar. So where do you kind of see athletes struggle, during gameplay with, just different mental pieces of soccer?
Yeah. So I think confidence is something that from time to time everybody struggles with, even maybe the teammate who you identify as being the most confident or the rock within your group, as well as, the teammates who you categorize sometimes as confidence guys. They need to be in a good mental space. They need to be confident in order to perform well, or, you may be getting something different from them on the day. If walking out onto the field, you can tell they're not there and they're not feeling confident. So I learned in two similar time periods, I would say, but two different groups, about the importance of confidence. So as an assistant coach, my first and second year were drastically different. We were 6-8-3. My first year as an assistant coach, and the following year we were 17-3-2 and lost in a conference final, but ended up advancing to the Elite Eight in the NCAA Division III tournament. And I realized the role that confidence played, looking at the teams from year to year and just seeing how getting on a run of wins early on in the season, that second year, convinced our group that they could compete against everybody. And they didn't hold back against teams that maybe in previous seasons there had been some trepidation in terms of facing. They weren't looking over their shoulder. It was a very focused mindset where they could bring a confident feeling into each game setting and kind of stay present in the moment as well. The second experience, again, my first year as a head coach at Misericordia to my second year. So my first year at Misericordia, we finished 12-5-3. We were the regular season conference champions, and we ended up losing in PKs in the conference final. But by most accounts, and certainly from my perspective as a first year head coach, pretty pleased with what we were able to accomplish in that season, and grateful for having a older group, a senior laden group that was ready to compete and ready to go out and win. The following year, after matriculating 16 players out of the program, we returned less than 50% of the roster we had had in 2016, and we were not good in our non-conference slate, and we finished 500 in the conference portion of our schedule to go 3-14-1. And so I saw it from kind of a different perspective, where I had a confident group, and then just a few close results that didn't go our way at the beginning of that 2017 season convinced our group somehow that we weren't capable of competing and that we were quote unquote too young. And we talked about how young we were in that season, but we also said at a certain point, we can't look at that as a barrier to our success. It's certainly a piece of adversity that we have to overcome. We don't have the experience that we had one season prior, but that doesn't mean we're incapable of winning games. And so those two examples really demonstrated to me, I think, early on in my coaching career, how important confidence is, and the need to, I think, manage it on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis, because it's something that unfortunately can be fleeting if the group is not mentally prepared. And I guess in a training sense, if you're not working on that mindset muscle, then the confidence piece can be fleeting.
Yeah, no, I kind of have been looking at this with, confidence or motivation, and the mental side is it's very much like endurance or technique or strategy. Of if you're not working on it if you're not working on it on a daily basis, when you need it, it's not going to be there. You can't wait till you realize, like, oh, we're out of shape, we got to get in shape. You got to be in shape when that moment comes, that you've got to be able to rely on that endurance. And the thing, I think the same thing is true with confidence or motivation or whatever it is you got to be working on it on a daily basis, so that moment that you do need it, you don't have to try to figure out on the spot, how do I get confident? All of a sudden I need it. Which is, a lot of prep work, and then, the second part, which is harder, which you try to avoid, is, what do you do when the confidence takes a hit? You have that bad game at the beginning of the year, and that confidence starts to dip, which I think are kind of two different mental muscles. And that's, one of the things that we have found a lot of is most people look at, the mental side as like one uniform, strength. It's like you either got the mindset or you don't. And the longer we've done it, we've seen that there are so many nuances, just like with technique, like just because you're a great defender doesn't mean you're a great forward, just sure. Like the techniques are very different. The positions are very different. The mental side of the sport is the same way. It can get very specific, and change a lot. So for you, mentally, obviously the sport is a pretty big percentage. What are some of the practices that you guys have tried to instill within the program to, continue to help support the athletes mentally, to continue to grow and be strong in that arena?
So something I implemented 2 or 3 years ago, and this is really stemming from my interest on the science side of things. When I started out as an assistant coach, I was doing my graduate degree in biochemistry, and I didn't really have an intention to coach as a career moving forward from there. I fell in love with it, obviously, and the rest of the story is self-explanatory, so to speak. But I still need to scratch that science itch every once in a while. And so I was doing some reading on session RPE and external internal load measures, trying to find things again that could give us a cutting edge as a program.
Right.
And I came across an app that tracked session RPE and started to get our guys to think more about how they're feeling and I guess taking stock in that on a daily basis. So we started having the guys fill out a questionnaire on a daily basis, and that questionnaire didn't take any longer than a minute, just evaluating how sore you are, how fatigued you are, what your quality of sleep was the night before, what your quality of nutrition was the day before, and finally what your mood or where your mood sat going into that day. And so that started to give us some really interesting information on reading where our players were on a daily basis and being able to adjust our training sessions and some of the things that we were doing on a week by week basis within the season, talking about periodization and that sort of stuff. It started to give us a better grasp on how we could be more effective with that. But I still noticed some mental things that were lacking. So I had been aware of your company and Jeff and Gene Zanetti. I'd been aware of kind of what they did, and I'd seen some of their YouTube videos. And so I just started to watch some of their stuff on a regular basis and kind of check in weekly with what they were posting and the content they were sharing. And lo and behold, I found out that our women's soccer coach had used the Predator Mindset book. And so I started to incorporate more of that information and to kind of bring us current and up to date this spring. I tend to go as a coach to tactics whenever I need something to talk about. We can't get out on the field
Right.
to do things, in an in-person sort of way. So I kind of challenged myself to find some different things to talk about. And one of the things that I noticed in the Predator Mindset book was just some of the science, again, that was quoted talking about, where do predatory mammals' eyes sit in their skull? They point forward. Talking about as well the recognition from athletes about how much of the game is mental, and then extrapolating that out or thinking about it logically and asking yourself the question, well, why don't we spend 70, 80, 90% of our time training the mental side of the game then? If athletes actually think that, then why are we not giving them more of that sort of content within our program? And so I kind of made the decision this spring after talking with our leadership council and again, being aware of this mindset training and also knowing that there was still something missing. We took the examples and we put together a PowerPoint and we said, okay, we're going to focus this spring, since we're off campus and we're learning in a remote way, we're going to take this spring to talk about mindset to help these guys maybe navigate some things that they're encountering in the current moment, but also with understanding that this is something that we need to spend more time on and that will aid us hopefully in the fall season, should it happen, which again, fingers crossed that we can get back out on the field in the fall of 2020. But whenever that point comes where we're getting back into a competitive sort of environment, the thinking was by addressing mindset in a very deliberate way this spring that we've called even more attention to the need to spend more time on this. And we're providing now some materials for our guys to think about certain things, to self-evaluate, and to come up with, again, a plan, so to speak, to approach maybe some of the mindset pitfalls that they may encounter during a season.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm glad that content in the book has been really helpful. Our aim, obviously, is to make the mental side more utilized as an edge for athletes. Just just like, back in the past, people didn't used to lift weights. And like now weight training isn't just, the brute force that it was even when it started. It's very scientific. It's very focused. It's different depending on which sport you're in. And, sports are evolving just like anything else that's competitive. And, I think that the mental side is this next area that's going to become more and more prevalent for teams, to utilize, which is why when we work with, programs and teams, it's the way we see ourselves is we're like a weightlifting coach, except for the mind. We're just another member of the staff to help, whether it's, doing a one-on-one call with a player that's, struggling, or a player that's had a ton of success, but they just starting to feel that wear and tear mentally on how to stay at the top, and aid programs that are, trying to be competitive. And because long-term, I know that the mental pieces of sports are what get taken into people's lives, right? Like
definitely.
You can have a great, throw in, you can have a great shot on goal, you can be a great goalkeeper, but unless you're coaching specifically, that's not necessarily going to aid you getting that job. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you're a great athlete doesn't even mean you'll be a great coach. They don't always have skills. And the mental side of sports is and the character side and the value side that is created within people is the side that makes us become better individuals, which long term should make a better society, which I think is what we're all hoping to do, as coaches and as mentors. Well, Andy, I really appreciate you joining us today. Is there any last questions or topics that you'd like to jump into before we finish up?
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic. It just seems to be, as you just said, something that's growing in terms of the support from the athletic community for this type of information and the need to be consistent with it, to address it at multiple points during the academic calendar year. It's not something that I think you can reference as we did this spring and then expect everybody to jump on board and understand how to self-evaluate and how to use these mindset training tools to help themselves or to help their teammates. I think it's something that begs a further conversation and I guess a continued focus moving forward. And so that would kind of be my parting comment. This is something that not only do you need to pay attention to, you have to work on it as many other things in life. And so the more consistent you can be with it, the more regular, I think the better results you can expect to incur from your efforts.
100%. I mean, it's the same way we talk about, you can't just talk about lifting weights and get stronger. You gotta have the actions. You gotta have the follow up, and mental training and mindset training that we recommend and we utilize is the same way. It's about creating new actions, new thought patterns, new ways of preparing for practice or preparing for competition or evaluating afterwards. And those don't just all happen at the same pace for everybody. Kind of like you talked about with the transition for freshmen coming in. Some people, they pick it up like that, and within a very short time period are able to utilize it. For some people, it takes a little bit longer. And as the coach, I think it's important to recognize that we are dealing with individuals that are different, and it's not going to be the same approach for everybody that is effective. But Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you guys the best of luck, and we're all really hoping that this fall we get a roll back out with sports and don't have to put it on hold for any longer.
I couldn't agree with that more, Jake. Thanks again for having me on, and stay safe and healthy moving forward through the rest of this public health situation we're in.
Of course, you too.